Well, today is November. We're shooting a video. And today we're going to talk about investment real estate and what that means for each of us. So, first, let's start out with just your name, your company, and kind of your portfolio.
Well, you're looking at me directly, so I'll start.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Mike VanderWoude. I'm a broker member here at GRAR, Edison Brokers & Co., a smallish brokerage. Real estate investment-wise, I have a relatively small portfolio, just 9 units over 3 buildings. Started picking those up in 2016, which this group would identify as still a decent time to do so. And for me, what they've meant, in 2016, I was turning 40. I was serving a lot of investment clients, and I was seeing their math and their long-term, positions in these things, and really feeling left out. And I thought, I need to get into this as an investor, not just as a broker. And that worked out. I mean, we could get into the particulars later of the math of it, but the time was good, and over a couple of years, I was able to pick up those 3 buildings. And 10 years ago, by the way, I had a special needs child, which has kept my wife at home the entire time. So 10 years of me being a sole breadwinner, this has allowed me to have what's like a second job that fits with the everyday hustle of real estate, and it's been an incredible thing for our household.
Perfect.
Allison Koetsier with Compass Realty Services. Bought my first rental property with my father in early 2000. Own just under 100 doors. Variety of small multis to some larger apartment complexes. And the one thing to remember always about investing is it is certainly a marathon, not a sprint.
Jason.
I'm Jason Schuringa from 5 Star Real Estate. I've been in real estate with 5 Star for 7 years, going on my 8th year here. So relatively new to the markets. We own 3 Airbnbs, my wife and I do. We bought them in the last 4 years, and kind of to tail on Mike's comments, the last 4 years have been difficult to find investment properties and make those numbers make sense. We were the beneficiary of low interest rates, second home financing, 10% down. And so, there's 3 investment properties there, and that's how we were able to build our portfolio. Why were they Airbnbs? Why were they short-term rentals? Like you were saying, our clients are looking for investment properties all the time, and you start to look at their numbers and their level of expectation, and the numbers just don't make sense as values go up 30% over the course of 5 years. And so Airbnb was our only route to get that return. Now we love it, but it is a lot of work.
Perfect. Thank you. So before we step into this next stage, I want to read this quote because I think it sets the stage really nicely for kind of this next line of questioning. So Dave Ramsey once said, "When people on the internet say real estate is passive income, what they mean is they've never owned any. There's nothing passive about managing real estate. It's a great investment, but it's not something you can purchase, then forget about and expect to collect a check." So with that being said, when you go out into the marketplace, how do you identify a good deal? What are you looking for in your investments?
Well, I think due to market conditions, this has already been hinted at. It's tough right now to find a really good deal. What I think was true in the 5, 8, 10 years in the past that can still be true is look for a value add situation. If it's a needle in a haystack to find just the deal to buy that meets these good, rates of return, those types of expectations, those are few and far between. And so you have to look for something, whether this was now or 2016, where you can increase the rents, or you can do something that adds more cash flow or whatever it's going to be, and not just, there is no buy it and forget it. It's not a thing. Now, I like to defend passive income a little bit and say there are months that are perfect, where all the rents come in. There's nobody to talk to about that. Here we are, second week of November, and I'm not in one of those already. But there are months that go by where all the rent comes in. There's no maintenance to deal with. There's no little annoying things, and that's wonderful, but that's not all the time. So,
Well, I think it is difficult in this market. Certainly in this market, it's easier for people coming from bigger markets. So West Coast, East Coast, they see our returns here differently than we do, and definitely seen that with investor clients and who I'm working with today versus who I was working with 10, 15 years ago. They're a different investor, and they're typically not from the state. But I still think if you find a quality property that you can either upgrade to a good level or is already there, I think you can still make a return in real estate, but you do have to, it's more of a long-term-ish thing. And I like to think of, there definitely is some passive income to rental property, but for me, the big benefit to rental property is the wealth building you can do, and the way you can not only affect your life, but your family's life, and what you can leave as far as legacy building to somebody. I have a 15-year-old son, and he's done a few things in the rental property business, but just what he'll be able to get from what I've done, it's really life-changing. And that's what rental property can bring to people that sometimes people don't see. So if you stay in it long enough, you can get to a pretty wonderful place.
So the question is, how do we find good deals in this market? At this point, I am traveling north of Traverse City once or twice a week. Most of my clients are purchasing Airbnbs and VRBOs, short-term rentals, to build portfolios like we're talking about. And they're not within an hour of Grand Rapids anymore. You need to reach to a 2, 3, 4 hour radius sometimes to find something that makes sense, because I think the cat kind of got out of the bag a couple years ago that these are pretty cool properties to hold. They cash flow a lot. It can be great as a second home, but with rates at 3, 4, and even getting into that 5%, a lot of people picked one up, and so that market got very saturated with buyers. And so it's not easy anymore, as in you can't drive 45 minutes north, find a cabin in the woods for $100,000 and say, I want to rent it out. There's a little bit more number crunching. There's a little bit more competition. And honestly, it's a lot of work to find a good deal in this market.
if I can add to what we covered a moment ago, for a few years now, I've made the joke that every broker that has investment clients has one from California and Colorado. This is entirely true of myself as well. And kind of what you were saying is, in their markets, there is no return. So like, we living here, working here, have probably higher expectations of return than these California, Colorado, New York investors. Any return to them looks better than what they can get where they are. So they come here. It's all, and these two might agree with me. Those people have also started to sell, exit, and leave, which is wild. Around some of the ones I own, there was this one particular New York guy, and I know who represented him. It was a good broker, and he made several purchases, and then I started to see those properties pop up again 2 years later as sales. The guy made money, but he's already come and gone, and I think there's some of that with these coastal or Colorado type investors. You seen that?
I'd agree with that. They're in and they're out.
Yeah, they're on to whatever the next market is, whether it's Boise, Idaho, or
When they come to
Nashville.
Michigan, though, aren't they shocked at our pricing compared to their pricing?
And some of them, like my California guy, he's got one around the corner from what I own. It's like, holy cow, I want that deal now.
Right.
It's gone, but wow, I feel good for him.
Just to piggyback on that, what are you seeing with those out-of-state investors as far as cap rates go, right? Compared to what they can get here, compared to what they're seeing in California, or pick your big state. Obviously they're jumping here for a reason. So what are they seeing for cap rates over there compared to here?
Well, in California, I think if you're 1, Maybe you
That's
can find two.
Yeah.
And I think here they're looking for 4 to 6
Yeah.
as far as a cap rate.
My career started in Illinois, and everybody was hung up on cap rate. They didn't even care what the asset was; they just wanted a certain cap rate. And I think you get a little bit of that from the out-of-market investors. Well, give me a 6, and I'm good.
Yeah,
Whereas-
all the out-of-state investors want to know the cap rate. And I personally am
Yeah.
not a big cap rate person as far as
Yeah.
evaluating an investment, but that is definitely there.
It's not the
Their
best
number.
measure for a 2-unit. It could be if you're in a 12-unit or bigger, but I don't even know how you do that with short-term rental.
Yeah, so we don't even speak cap rate language. I mean, I know when I started, 8 to 12 was kind of this conversation starting point to how many years you could pay it off. But anytime an investor asks me cap rate, I ask him how many properties he's actually held for 8 years.
Right.
If you're going to be using this standard that is not what you live by, I talk more cash flow.
Yeah.
How much can we make on top of your costs? That window with rates going up has gotten smaller and smaller because now even a second home financing, that cash flow might only be a couple $100. We're almost in that same boat with long-term rentals, long-term investments.
Well, you're a great example of doing what the market gives you.
Exactly.
So you want to be in the investment business, and buying a standard rental property is more difficult than it used to be unless you can value add it or find, a reasonable deal. So you're doing what's been presented to you. That's great.
Would you say that it's easier to buy a long-term investment property now because you have a portfolio that you can lean on, and maybe like how much would you put down on a good deal today, or how much do you think that you would need to put down on a good deal today?
Well, for me, definitely having a larger portfolio does mitigate risk. And it also allows you to pay cash or do a better term commercial loan than you might be able to get as a conventional loan. So it definitely changes those options. But it's hard. I bought a property maybe 3 years ago was the last time I bought a property. So I'm not sure that there would be a property that I would buy, because now you have the problem with pricing being up and interest rates. So when I first bought rental property, I was paying 7 or 8%, but I wasn't paying $200,000 for rental
Right.
property. I was paying $80,000. So just different numbers.
Do you see financing as being the biggest issue or biggest hurdle to get over in order to get into investments?
It will become. We just got to this crazy interest rate environment, or normal, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But this will become less attractive. I mean, what have we witnessed these last 5 to 10 years? Everybody in the world wants to be a real estate investor.
Mhm.
Get a piece of real estate. Get a piece of real estate, and they'll begin moving on to something else, and you'll find out who the real estate investors are.
I think financing is always especially as down payments went up.
Mhm.
So just after the crash, you could buy a rental property, you could leave the closing with cash
Mhm.
for rehab.
Yeah.
So you truly
anymore.
could buy a property if you had good credit with no money down. And I've seen it was 20%. I've seen some banks are now 25%. Some are even requiring 30% down in investment properties. So you have the double whammy of having to have more cash to get started, and then your payment's going to be more.
We might see more increased sophistication, like syndications, where maybe because certainly cash buyers have been something we haven't mentioned yet, but are certainly out there. And maybe they'll start to pool together and create investment pools, and then not deal with the bank or become the bank.
Yeah.
Find a schmuck like me to manage it or take it on, and then I get the interest rate to the cash buyer or whatever it is. I think we'll see more and more things like that.
Do you think we'll see the land contract come back? Does anybody think that's coming back?
To some extent, I mean,
I don't know if a land contract would make sense. I mean, the interest rate would need to be 20%. And so it just seems like the market doesn't justify it.
or maybe not land contract, but alternative
Purchase money
financing.
mortgage.
I think for sure they'll have to.
Totally. Okay, so let's move on to management. Do we all manage our own properties? Do you hire a property manager? What are the pros and cons? What do you see on that front?
You're the big one. You start.
So in the beginning, did everything. So managed our own, mowed the lawns, turned the units, everything I could do, I did. Now I try to not change any light bulbs ever. So I think it's a progression. It's, what do you want to do? But I think there's benefit to getting dirty, especially in the beginning, but making sure that your investment has room for a property management fee structure. But once you've done it yourself, I think you have a better understanding of how to manage a property manager and what kind of property manager you're looking for, because certainly depending on what you own and where you own it and what type of property maintenance it's going to need determines what type of property manager is going to fit you the best. So I actually have 4 different property managers managing different portfolios that I have. So you definitely need to have the right person in place, I would say. But I'm a big management person from a time standpoint. I don't like those calls anymore.
I have the 9 units, so that's manageable for me. That's something like $8,500 a month in rent, so it's not an astounding amount to track. I can track most of it in my head or with a very simple spreadsheet, and I know within a day if somebody isn't current. I actually enjoy the accounting because you see the money move and you see the balances on your 3.5% mortgages go down every month, and I try to live by kind of an algorithm with this cash flow. I show property every day of my life, so I'm not going to have someone filling apartments for me. That doesn't make sense. I market property, so I'll market my own with the proper disclosures. Maintenance becomes the sticky one. When something of a emergency variety happens, then I'm burning up the phone trying to. That's pretty rare. Maybe a time or 2 per year with 9 units. So I would have to have 3 or 4 times the portfolio to farm it out before it would make any sense for me, in my opinion. So.
With 3 short-term rentals, it's self-managed. So we manage the renting it out, the Airbnb communications, my wife and I, and it's really only maybe 5 hours a week for 3. The difference between, I guess, how we build our portfolio and maybe other people, our need on the purchase is, would we want to be there ourselves? Would we want to enjoy the property ourselves? And so we do visit the properties, maybe quarterly, and we do some of the property maintenance ourselves, like the handyman type stuff. But other than that, it's fully managed and maintained by 2 contacts, a cleaner that you know and trust and love, and that that cleaner oftentimes is doing kind of borderline handyman things. Okay, it's not just wipe it up, wipe it down, make the beds and leave. It's a little bit more involved than that. And then there's an actual handyman that lives close by just in case something is broken. And honestly, for 3, I think we're at that level where we could maybe grow to 1 or 2 more before we start consider farming it out. It does get a little bit dicey in the summer with rentals and overlappings, and then you get one issue and all of a sudden you feel like you're behind on all of the messaging. So 3 is a good number. At about 4 or 5, you could probably start looking into companies like Evolve or just a manager of short-term rentals in general to help you.
Totally. Do you have like one specific unit, maybe one deal where you bought it and you said, hey, this is definitely got to be my best investment, right? Do you have that one in your brain that you can think of? Any examples of that? Of like, hey, picked up this one unit and it just took off.
My very first one, it was 2016. There's a large property owner in town that brought me just a bomb to list. Oddly enough, very near the new Bridge Street Market, which wasn't there then. So we sold that for them. And he brought me another one, and he's like, if you thought that last one was something, wait till you see this. He said, bring your flashlight and watch out for the holes in the floor. So I went over there, and as brokers, the second we have an interest, we need to disclose it. So I actually called him from this boarded up house, and I said, this is the one I'm going to do. said, I'm going to figure this out. Instead of listing it, how about, we worked out a price, and I scraped up the cash for that one. There was hypodermic needles in it. There was animal carcasses. Took me 3 months to get my construction loan together. And so it was probably a $36K purchase, I think 115 in construction. So that gets me to about 150 invested. Got that appraisal for 160, so there's a little instant equity there. Rented it back then for, which turned into 2017, 1,200 a unit, so 2,400. Do the quick math on that, it's pretty good.
Mhm.
Locked it in at a really low long-term interest rate, and it's just, the person that sold it to me has coined the term a money printer at certain stops along the way, and this is my money printer. It just does really, really well. And so you can take on diminishing marginal returns, if you will, to go back to college accounting courses or finance courses. And I bought the one next door at a lower rate of return, but if you think of it now as a 6 unit instead of a 2 unit, it still does pretty well. It's a larger scale, even if that building next door doesn't hit quite the same percentage returns. So there's mine.
I bought a 4-unit probably back in 2010 from the bank, so 40,000, but needed everything, and then went through the Grand Rapids Rental Rehab Program, where the city will actually pay for half of your remodel plus some lead-based paint money. So did a $135,000 remodel for about 60 grand. And in the middle of that place being tore up, appealed the property taxes. So the place got totally rehabbed, and my annual property tax bill on that property is $1,400
You knew
today.
a guy who was good at that
Today,
too.
I did.
Yeah.
So
Cool deal.
Our first Airbnb is the money printer, the cash cow. And at the time, it was the most nerve-wracking thing. We had to put 10% down on a $200,000 cottage on a lake up north, and we were going, this is crazy. And our costs associated with running it are around $20,000, $25,000 a year. And annually, it grosses over 60. And so this little 5-hour-a-week part-time job is something that gets me through slow times, that gets us through winter. We've got 3 children, 1 on the way, and we've got education to pay for and things like that. And you don't think about it at the time, but that first purchase sometimes of a second home, and kind of getting into some of these closing questions here, having one second home and turning it into something is, if you don't have anything right now in this market, taking advantage of that type of low financing, even though the rates are high, it is an option to build a portfolio to start. It takes one.
Cash flow's king. So what are maybe your final thoughts, or what are some tips you'd give somebody who's sitting out there and saying, hey, I want to become a real estate investor. I want to get involved in this. What's something you would tell them?
the first thing I always tell someone is you have to figure out what are your goals and why are you doing this. So you have to make sure that whatever investment you're going to purchase or whatever your plan is meets up with what you're trying to do. Are you trying to put your kids through college? Are you looking to diversify? Are you looking for cash flow? And then that answer determines whether there's an investment out there in this market for you or what investment that should be and how much time are you willing to devote to that. And I think it's really difficult sometimes to get people, clients, anybody to just really look into the future and say, what do I really want to do this for? Because being a real estate investor, sure, is that cool to say? Maybe. But if you don't really have a plan, you might end up in the wrong investment. I've helped so many people buy rental property, then I've helped them sell it, and then I've helped them buy it again. I've helped them sell it again.
Yep.
And probably if they'd hit a little clearer in the beginning, they'd be way ahead.
I think people are going to need to look for alternative ways to purchase. One of my business partners lived across from a beat-up 12-unit. So he looked at it every day. He's called the guy. Next thing you know, he owns it on land contract with a partner. And it was a total value add. For 12 units, 5 of them were vacant.
Oh.
So there's a lot of just even market rate rent to pick up there, but then they started improving them and had this for less than 2 years, and the numbers on it already, from buying on a land contract to the value add items, the numbers are already incredible. It already looks like a once in a lifetime investment, and they snuck that in like 2020 and 2021.
Incredible.
My piece of advice would be, if you're going to think short-term rental, Airbnb for a portfolio, to do something that you enjoy yourself personally. It's kind of hard to be investing in this market where you're not visiting that property or enjoying it or investing more time in it than just crunching the numbers, buying it, filling it up with a tenant, and spinning it up and walking away. I think the numbers are too tight for that. I think they have been for years. So to be involved in something that or to purchase something that you want to be at that property, enjoying it, you tend to kind of not neglect the purchasing side of things, which is a very high risk. But you use all of your talents, all of your gifts, a little bit extra time to make sure that that does cash flow, to make sure that your family does get paid for that property. And it tends to work out better that way.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.